We're going to continue here, going through the Psalms. This is Psalm 46. God is our fortress. To the choir master of the sons of Korah, according to Elamoth, a song. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns, the nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Like many psalms before this, we see I suppose we can call it a process through discussing, perhaps through singing, as this is a song, through this practice of recognizing the strength of God in the context of strength through adversity. This is a common theme in the Psalms. Verse 1 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Again, not quite understanding what God is, but refuge and strength. Is it the case that in times of trouble, that anything that is our place of refuge and anything that is our source of strength is therefore God? I don't think so. But I do think that God, in this sense, is a place of refuge and strength. And so the question becomes, if there are many sources of strength and of refuge in times of trouble, and if God is a particular one of these, then what is it exactly? Of course, we cannot just go based off of our feelings, for our feelings can help us identify what gives us strength and gives us refuge. But it won't for certain explain to us that what gives us strength and what gives us refuge is, in fact, the being of all beings. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. And here the symbolism of the mountain, this symbol of stability and strength, even though this is moved into the heart of the sea, again, for it to be submerged, for this symbol of strength to be subdued by chaos and by disorder. Though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling, at the swelling of the waters, that brings this disorder to an ordered world, we will have faith. We will have strength. And so God is beyond this mountain, the symbol of strength. It is beyond the symbol of strength. So every source of strength of the material world is bound to be subdued by another force of nature, perhaps. And in the divine sort, our faith in our reason, our faith in our reason, our faith in our continued existence in the face of adversity is, at least in part, I believe, the faithfulness of the Christian person. Again, it matters where it is directed, but at its fundamental level, I think at least we can say this from these first 3 verses. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. Interesting. So there's a river. And so what can we say of the symbol of the river? Of course, in the previous example, the sea and the water itself is a symbol of, in a sense, destruction. Destruction of what at once we thought was stable. Our conception of the mountain was our place of stability. And it was subdued. It was submerged into this place, into this sea. And now we see another body of water, this river that flows into the city of God. Now, of course, the city of God is a glorious thing. It is a place that we wish to dwell, for it is free of injustice, perhaps. It's free of the unrighteous or of the wicked, free of the unjust. And so why would it be that this river that flows into this city improves its condition? This river is a symbol of refreshment and of abundance, as we can imagine our ancestors utilizing the river not only for transportation in the ancient world, but also for a way to a source from which they can irrigate their farmland. And so any river in those days was necessary for the establishment of a city. And so in this context, if we imagine the establishment of a city, but not just any city, a city that is filled with the people of God, then this river is the thing that provides it abundance and nourishment, that facilitates its growth and longevity. The nations rage, and the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. And so the Lord of hosts, this phrase, has been uttered twice in this psalm. And I believe that it refers to God as the ultimate authority, the Lord of hosts. And this term, host, I believe can refer to any number of things. It can refer to man, it can refer to angels, it can refer to material objects. It's the God of them all. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. So God is at once the end of this destruction and violence, but also the bringer. And again, it's not a matter of is every form of desolation and of this unity, perhaps confusion, the work of God, perhaps. And it's not every building up or form of stability, as we've already established, that is God. It is the very specific nature of it, a very particular directionality to it, that is the God of all things. And this is what we are after as people, to determine the way in which we are to be, so that we may bring this divine kingdom closer to earth. Psalm 47, God is king over all the earth. To the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with loud songs of joy, for the Lord, the Most High, is to be feared. A great king over all the earth. He subdued peoples under us, and nations under our feet. He chose our heritage for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. God has gone up with a shout. The Lord, with the sound of a trumpet, sings praises to God, sings praises. Sing praises to our King, sing praises. For God is the King of all the earth. Sing praises with a psalm. God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne. The princes of the peoples gather, as the peoples of God, of Abraham. For the shields of the earth belong to God. He is highly exalted. The psalm indicating again, at once it is a song and of a practical matter, of involvement, of worship, but also indicative of the position of the divine in relationship to man. Zion, the city of our God, Psalm 48. A song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful in elevation is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion is in the far north, the city of the great King. Within her citadels, God has made himself known as a fortress. For behold, the kings assembled. They came on together. As soon as they saw it, they were astounded. They were in panic. They took to flight, trembling, took hold of them there. Anguish, as of a woman in labor. By the east wind you shattered the ships of the Tarshish. As we have heard, so we have seen, in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, which God will establish forever. We have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple, as your name, O God. So your praise reaches to the end of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness. Let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. Walk about Zion, go around her, number her towers, consider well her ramparts, go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. So, a fairly simple psalm here. This is an identification of the stability of God, the fundamental nature of God. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. His holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, is the joy of all the earth. So God's mountain on earth, again a place of stability, security. Within her citadels, God has made himself known as a fortress. So it's very clear in the minds of the Israelites that wrote this psalm that at this moment in time, God is with them, with their people in their city, and the hope for the future is that God has filled every part of the city so that the future generations understand what it means, understands the direction that they should walk in, how they should lead their lives. Psalm 49. Why should I fear in times of trouble? To the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble, when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of abundances of their riches. Truly no man can ransom another, or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly, and can never suffice. That he should live on forever, and never see the pit. For he sees that even the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish, and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep, they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though, while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, who will never again see light. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. So this is quite the psalm. It's going to take some time to unpack this one. And so let's start with the title. It's an interesting title. Why should I fear in times of trouble? Because it's a matter of perspective. Either one is asking that question because they are in fear in a time of trouble, or they're asking perhaps from a more of a defensive angle. Why should I fear in times of trouble? Sort of assuming that because they have trust in the Lord, this question comes forth. Because I have faith in the Lord, why should I fear in times of trouble? So there are two angles that we can approach this question from. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor. So a general call to everyone. It's interesting, the statement. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high. And then a sort of a qualifying statement afterwards, rich and poor together, as though rich and poor is but a fraction of the low and the high that can constitute any particular individual inhabitant. And if I reflect on all the ways that an individual can be both low and high, I quickly recognize that there are many. Certainly, an individual can be low or high in terms of his material status, his wealth, his richness, or his poorness. But also this richness or poorness can be of soul, of mind, of heart, of body. There are any numbers of interpretations here. And so it's with this depth and this spread that we are to hear the voice that comes from this psalm. Wherever you are in life, hear it. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. And so this almost gives me chills to read this. Every once in a while, a psalm that seems to be truly inspired by the divine comes into the foreground. And I believe here, with this magnificent setup for what this author is about to say, we certainly see it. My mouth shall speak wisdom. This declaration of something is coming. This is after the proposal for everybody to hear, regardless of their position in life. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. That is, his being is seeking after truth. Not just his conscious reason, but the entirety of him desires the truth. It desires understanding. And to desire true understanding and to speak wisdom means that the whole of the man is interested in the truth. He's not interested in deception, not interested in partial truths. He's interested in being convinced completely and totally that will satisfy him, so nothing burdens him and nothing plagues him. I will incline my ear to a proverb, meaning that he will listen to the sort of broad nature that comes from Proverbs, sort of an abstract thought, poetic thought that is written and then blown into the, I don't want to say blown into the ether, but it's blown into our reality for us to admire and to contemplate. So he's open to receiving wisdom. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Again, through this way of being, the totality of him, of understanding, of appreciation of beauty. This he will solve the question. By this he will solve the question, why should I fear in times of trouble? Why should I fear in times of trouble, when the iniquity of those who cheat surrounds me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundances of their riches. Truly no man can ransom another, or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly, and can never suffice. That he should live on forever, and never see the pit. So there's a lot in these 5 verses. So let's go line by line. So he starts by restating the initial title, Why Should I Fear in Times of Trouble? Verse 5 and verse 6 all culminate into a question. And so why should I fear in times of trouble, comma, when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me? So again, those who are grossly immoral, those who are not upright in character, they are, in a sense, in a state of poverty. When the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me. An example from the modern day: there is no shortage of those well-intentioned individuals who are a part of an institution or of a system that inadvertently cheat those who come to them for a service or for assistance. And I think this sort of thing, whether it be through education, through the cost of education, through the interest that one has to pay back on a loan, through the expenses that one must pay to seek help for their physical ailments or mental ailments. I think in these examples, it's easy to appreciate the depth of the iniquity of those who cheat us. And it could just as easily come from those who mean to do harm, as well as those who mean to do well, but, as I've said, inadvertently do the opposite. They do wrong. It is through this self-deception that they are able to have this iniquitous behavior and cheat others. Now this reflection, again, is a reflection of depth. It is not necessarily those who he is explicitly referring to, because in the next statement here, he continues by saying, those who trust in their wealth and boast of the abundance of their riches. And that is the end of the question. So I'll read it in its entirety again. Why should I fear in times of trouble, when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me, those who trust in their wealth and boast of abundance of their riches? So this interpretation, a possible interpretation, is the one that I've outlined of the self-deception, the individual that is deceived in order to provide for themselves, absorbed in their own pursuit of wealth, riches, and abundance, blinds them to the consequences of their iniquity. Or it could be those, and there are many in every society, that outrightly pursue the lesser for status. They pursue base desires to satisfy the soul temporarily so that they may continue with their lifestyle. I think of the potential for this type of behavior in our economy from those that work in finance, from those that work in government. But it's not relegated to a specific profession or a particular individual. It is at once everywhere possible for somebody to fall into this way of being, to pursue something because the opportunities in society allow for an increase in abundance and an increase in riches. And so with every pursuit, there is the possibility for self-deception and deceit, or outright misplaced goods that drive one's choices in life, to choose a profession for money rather than for purpose and for meaning. And so we have this question: why should I fear in times of trouble? And so we don't necessarily have an answer. Sometimes questions can be proposed that in the structure of the question, we call these rhetorical questions, there need not be an answer, because the question itself is so, either it's so obvious or the answer is hidden within the question that no answer is needed. We can stretch our reason to find this question in the realm of the rhetorical, but it does require, I think, a bit more fleshing out, which begins with verse 7. Truly no man can ransom another, or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly, and can never suffice, that he should live on forever, and never see the pit. And so, this verse, or these series of verses, this is 7 through 9, I think is telling. And I think a lot is said here in a very small space. And you'll have to forgive the siren that passes. I live on a busy street. Truly no man can ransom another. What does this mean? No man can ask for monetary compensation or for any sort of compensation. It doesn't have to be money. It could be a material benefit. It could be a psychological benefit. No man can ransom another. He cannot ask for something in exchange for somebody else's life. Truly no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice. In other words, there is no price sufficient to ransom another person. So here we see in the Christian tradition the value that is placed on the individual. We see the origins of where these ideas come from, and how much we take for granted in our modern day society about the natural rights, about our natural rights, that every citizen is guaranteed within the nation. And yet it comes from a very humble place, a place of true questioning, a place of a mouth that speaks wisdom, and from the meditation of a heart, from the place of understanding, of people that were open to listening to Proverbs, and that truly appreciated beauty and the arts. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. And I think this last statement here that I just read seems to imply that in the context of this ransom of the life of another being costly and can never suffice for what? We can imagine any number of things, but it will not suffice, because our life is finite, and the cost of that life would transcend the finite nature of any individual life. Sort of an interesting reflection. The cost of a life is beyond the life of an individual. That he should live on forever and never see the pit. Again, it's this understanding, or this recognition, that man is, and his existence is transitory, is temporary. And so we are limited in what we can, perhaps what we can do, what we can accept, what we can ask of God, what we can ask of our fellows, the relationship that we can have to our fellows. And certainly we cannot be in a position where we can take the life of another and offer it for a price, because there is no price that is lofty enough that would be sufficient. Even if a man desires a price that is seemingly sufficient in the material world, in truth and in morality, there is none. It is against natural law. For he sees that even the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish, and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. So it's a continuation of the previous verses, I believe. This is verse 10, ending at verse 12. Even the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish. So all things in the human condition are finite, at least from the individual condition. And so everybody must leave their wealth to another. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they call lands by their own names. And by this, it is meant that I think this has to do with the proper placement of value. Because if a man is to accumulate things throughout his life, let's say in this example, he accumulates land. He buys this land. He places a house on it. Perhaps it's a sizable house, perhaps it's a modest house, it doesn't matter. But this land will be associated to his name. And I think the implication here is that this naming of the land is as temporary as the life of the man who worked to buy it. In other words, the meaning that is behind this name is lower on this hierarchy of value. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. Again, it's this comparison of the finite to the infinite rest. The individual dies, even though the land that proceeds from him persists. That individual character, the person that placed so much value in this land, is now gone. And so what is this land? Certainly it is for the future generations. It's not meaningless. It could be meaningless if there's no one to give it to, certainly. Man in his pomp will not remain. So in all the gloriousness that man is, and all of the glory given his circumstance compared to all of the life and animals that are on the earth, his conscious mind separates him seemingly above the rest. Despite this, he is like the beast that will perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of their boasts. Like sheep they are anointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, where he will receive me. And so this is, I think, the culmination of this psalm. There's a lot of wisdom, I think, in these verses. This is verse 13 through 15. So when it says in verse 13, this is the path of those who have foolish confidence, what is the path and what is this foolish confidence? Well, the path is what we have talked about earlier. It is the path of those who have pursued a secular life, a material life, a life that is devoted to the earthly comforts and not the heavenly. They've devoted themselves to money, perhaps to land. In and of themselves, this devotion is not bad if it's placed in its proper context, if it's placed within the bosom of love, let's say. That someone works hard to establish a family, to raise their family up, to be upright individuals, to be upstanding citizens. In this sense, it is not a fool. This person is not a fool, nor did they walk down a foolish path. However, There are many out there that pursue things just for the sake of pursuing the material nature, just to pursue the land and to pursue the nice house that goes on it. And the family that is in the house, if there is one, is secondary. What is primary is the status. What is primary is the money. What is primary are the material objects, the nice car, the abundance of food. And a life in this way, we often hear about the rich suffering. And many of us who are not rich can't imagine why the rich would suffer when they have seemingly everything given, but certainly it's not everything. If the mind is not oriented properly, the soul will not be satisfied. I've experienced this in my own life, both personally and also from members of my own family. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of their boasts. And this is the people that see the rich man and they say, I want to be like this person. I want to drive that nice car. I want to wear that nice watch. I want to be able to wear that nice suit, walk into a nice hotel perhaps, or a nice restaurant, and I want to have people look at me. I want to be consumed by this vanity. And this is what I'm going to pursue. This is my path that I'm going to walk. Again, verse 13, this is the path of those who have foolish confidence. And it comes full circle. And when they find themselves in the position they've achieved, then again, yet after them people approve of their boasts. And it continues in this way, in this cycle. Like the sheep they are appointed for Sheol, death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. And so this verse is it's another step up in this wisdom staircase. Like sheep, referring to those who walk the path of the foolish and have foolish confidence. They are appointed for Sheol, so they are appointed for this afterlife, this dull afterlife in which there is no deliverance of the soul. There is just this dull nothingness, the void we can call it. Death shall be their shepherd. It's an interesting statement. Death shall be their shepherd. In life, we can imagine this to mean that their true liberation comes from death, not from love, or in the deliverance of the soul that will outlive them. Death shall be their shepherd. Their influence will die with them. All the material things of their life that they have accumulated, the superficial ends that they have pursued, and the superficial riches that they have received, are fragile. They're a fragile tower. A house of cards, perhaps, easily blown over by the wind, by nothingness, by the smallest degree of disorder. It would bring this at once seemingly indestructible order and of value in the mind of a young man or a young woman crashing down into nothing. and the upright shall rule over them in the morning, because the upright understand the importance of love, its infinite nature, its transcendent nature, the nature that transcends the individual, that permeates through the spirit of the family, that lives beyond one individual, that persists within the soul. What exactly does this mean? It's possible that it could mean that it's wound up in a collective sense. So if we refer to the family, which I think is the fundamental unit, I think it's this body that is most apt to transmit the infinite, to transmit the divine calling, let's say. Of course, it can erode in time with an individual within that family, or individuals within that family that were raised up in one way that walk another path, that walk the path of the superficial goods. And in that sense, that family and that spirit becomes less, denatured, dull, transitory. The enlightenment of that spirit, that binding force that holds the unity of that family together, dissolves. But as long as the love is maintained, as long as the offspring are committed to maintaining a family and raising young, that spirit will persist. The spirit of love will persist. The upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. So again, a similar statement as before in verse 14. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. This is interesting, because what is the form? Because in death, their form is consumed, because Sheol is a place after death. And what is this form then? It's certainly not the physical that they're referring to here. It's not the physical body. As obviously every physical body dissolves, it returns to the earth. But their form, the way they existed in life, dissipates. Their memory dissolves. All memories dissolve in time. But there's something more than just memory that holds the soul of man. And I can't help but to think that much of it is wound up in love, and it's wound up in the connection that we have with others. And this continuation of the spirit, which in one sense is a dilute version of the self. Dilute would probably be a negative way to go about saying this, but it is a more of a pure self without the ego. It just contains its purest moments, the through line of its existence. And if the through line of its existence is love, then it will persist within those relationships, within that memory, and most importantly within the family, because the family is the thing that is meant to continue and to transcend. And so if the spirit is truly love, then I think it puts things into perspective of what it means to be an individual, of what it means for the soul to be immortal. Because I think for many, and perhaps for myself, when I think of the soul, when I think of the potential afterlife, I have this unfortunate antagonism to humility that suggests to me that my egotistical desires in this life will be carried with me into the next. And of course, through this understanding, it's obvious it will not. The life of man will continue. My life, in the sense of me, my ego, will fail, but to the extent to which I recognize the finer things, and I sacrifice the portions of myself to it, that is, to love, that part of me will carry on in my actions, in my behaviors, in the work of this life that I put forth, perhaps to have a family, or to inject my love into the offspring of another, to raise them up to be upright, whatever the circumstance may be. This is the immortality of my soul, not the immortality of my ego. So I like to pause here and dwell on a reflection that comes up in my mind. The unfortunate thing about the modern day is the frame through which we view the world. And given the events that have occurred in the past couple hundred years, it seems to me obvious that what we refer to as the Enlightenment era, whenever the boundaries of that era were, but broadly speaking, the era in which man began to think more rationally, scientifically, began to design institutions that were more conducive to the human spirit, let's say. And in one hand, it was a true enlightenment going through it. But after coming out of it and seeing what it left us with, it is anything but enlightenment. Because just as an individual wishes to sell a house, the individual doesn't just sell one room of that house. If they want to truly be rid of all of it and to, get the money that the house is valued at. If we were just to say that my house is just this room, the meaning that underlies the rest of the structure is less. Because the house is not just one room. It has many rooms. It has, let's say, in a quite large house, 3 levels. It has an upstairs, it has the ground level, and it has a basement. And there are many rooms in this house. Perhaps there's 3 bedrooms on the first floor. Perhaps there's a bathroom in the master bedroom. Perhaps there's a bathroom, a common bathroom for the other 2 bedrooms. On the main floor, you have a living space. You have a kitchen. Perhaps you have a bathroom there. Perhaps you have an entry and exit way to the garage, the front door. And then the basement, likewise. Perhaps there's another common area. Perhaps there's a bedroom. Perhaps there's another bathroom. There's a storage area. And when I think about the Enlightenment, at least what it has left us, not in all cases, as humanity is not at any era completely subdued by a particular frame or way of seeing or way of viewing. But what I speak of is the dominant spirit that moves one foot in front of the other. And this dominant spirit, I believe, is that of this hyper-rationalism, this deductive empiricism and rational thinking, which is not to say that I think that this way of viewing is wrong. Because again, just as if we are to say that if we relegated the house to one room, we denature the rest in terms of its structure, its value. Likewise, if we are to recognize the rest of this house without the room, that is this empiricism, this rational thinking, this first principled thinking, we would also be much lesser for it. And we can adjust the analogy perhaps to say that the entirety of the upstairs is this way of viewing. That would probably be a better way of seeing it, because it's, in the case of this house, in the context of the size of this house, one room may not be exactly equivalent to this way of seeing the world. It's a necessary way of seeing the world. I think it's necessary for an upright man to see the world in this way, or at least to be able to see the world in this way. But if this is the only way in which we see the world, the degree to which we understand love, the degree to which we are engaged in being, suffers immensely. The way we orient ourselves to the external world, we are forever relegated to the objective. We can never again inhabit the subjective self. We can never utilize the fullness of the human experience to properly orient ourselves to the external environment. And while we can do much with the objective view and the objective frame, it is not enough as a binding force. It is not enough, I would even argue, to understand the nature of reality without the component of being, without the component of connectedness, of love. And in and of itself, it has become a religion. This objective view has become the subject in its totality, and I think it has robbed us of the fullness of the human experience. And in this robbery, I think we descend away from enlightenment towards a dark age. Now, when we moved prior to the Enlightenment into what we consider now to be the Enlightenment, I think that was truly an enlightening age, because we discovered this way of thinking, the scientific method, this approach to our reality. But again, it eroded in time. And so, I suppose I'll leave that reflection there. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. And so another interesting statement. God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol. So as if Sheol is another entity in this case. And of course, Sheol, we think of a place, almost like a heaven or a hell, except this sort of intermediary, in my mind at least. It's this place of dullness, of flatness, the void, perhaps you can call it. But God will ransom my soul, meaning that God has the funds, he has the value to purchase your soul from the void, from the nothingness. For he will receive me. So, within our example that we have used many, many times about the existence of man being thrown into this proverbial room that is dark, and so man in this context has been robbed of his vision, and he comes upon a structure that is surrounded by various objects. These objects, we understand, surround what is the divine spirit. And yet, of course, according to this analogy, man cannot see, so he cannot explicitly know the divine or this around, but he stumbles through the room, slowly understanding its contents. And through this understanding and slow perception, he's able to more fully appreciate what it means, what the divine spirit is, and slowly he gains his sight back, if we want to put it that way. And so our continual thread here when going through the Psalms has been to use the Psalms in this way, as the sort of the objects that surround the divine, so that we can more fully appreciate what the divine is. And in this case, God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. We understand a little bit more about the divine character. That is, the divine character is something that is able to save the soul from the darkness, from its admission into the realm of nothingness and dullness. I think this applies as much to the soul of the living as it does the soul of the dead. And the soul of the dead, being an immortal thing, it can at once be seen as the eternal good, perhaps, this thing that every man and woman can tap into, and can be saved if they tap in their individual soul to it. And so in this way, the surrounds something that is able to persist and to continue the light, to continue the very intelligibility of reality, the thing that is able to properly orient us, the thing that is properly able to have us recognize through experience and through being what the proper relationship of the self to the external environment should be, what the upright man and his internal self should be comprised of, what things that he should surrender to God, and the other things that are okay for him to maintain his experience in this reality. Verse 16, "Be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when his glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed. And though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, who will never again see light. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish." So a beautiful way to end this psalm. It recounts the transitory nature of human life, the superficiality of the goods that are gained in the material life of man. And then it goes on to say that man in his glory, yet again, without understanding, is like the beast that perishes. And so this understanding is the thing that separates him from the beast. And what are we to understand? We are to understand the right way of orienting ourselves to this reality, to this environment. The proper way of the subject. Not only does it involve the form of the subject, but also the relationship of the subject to the object, to the objective world. And not only the relationship to the objective world, but what objects in the objective world that are worth pursuing. And so we see a bit of a trinity here, a bit of a threefold dynamic. The subject and its character, the through line, which is the relationship to the objective reality as a whole, and the objective reality in its character. Now, I'm not saying that this conception, this idea, is the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In some sense it is, actually, because through the Son, we modify the self in terms of our behavior, and if we walk with the Son, or through the Son, we find the Spirit, and through the Spirit, we find the Father. And the Father isn't necessarily the objective reality, because the Father is outside of the universe, technically, would have to be, if it is the creator of the universe. So it's not quite the right analogy, but I think it is on the right path, the right trajectory. Psalm 50. God himself is judge. A psalm of Asaph. The mighty one, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth. From the rising of the sun to its setting, out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire. Around him, a mighty tempest. He calls to the heavens above, and to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather to me, my faithful ones, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Hear, O my people, and I will speak, O Israel. I will testify against you. I am your God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house, or goats from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls, or drink the blood of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. But to the wicked God says, what right have you to recite my statutes, or to take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline, and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself, but now I rebuke you, and lay the charge before you. Mark this, then, you who forget God, lest I tear you apart, and there be none to deliver. The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. And so one right after the other, an informative psalm after informative psalm. So what can we say here about Psalm 50? God himself is judge. And so to begin with, the mighty one, God the Lord, speaks and summons the earth. From the rising of the sun to its setting, out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. And so I think what this is saying here is that God's will, his divine grace, as it shines forth into the universe, it raises the earth to a particular place in terms of the visibility of maybe value, this understanding, this hierarchy of understanding, that the earth has a special place because on that earth is life. And within that life lies the mind of the human being, this conscious entity that is able to perceive of finer things. And so therefore, God speaks and summons the earth. Because we have that earth on its surface has heavenly beings. And even more into that body of perceptibility or intelligibility, whatever you want to call it, out of Zion, a specific place, a specific orientation, a specific people, a specific city that is bound in a certain way, has a certain covenant. The perfection and beauty of God shines forth. So it is a way Our God comes. He does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire, around him a mighty tempest. So an interesting statement. Often we think of God as a stabilizing force, a centralizing figure, a light that gives us confidence. There's no shortage of psalms here that say something to the effect of, God is strength, God is my fortitude and my light, my deliverer, and all that, of course, is true. But also you have the symbolism in the Bible that comes in the form of our God comes. He does not keep silent. Before him is a devouring fire. Around him is a mighty whirlwind, a storm, tempest. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth that he may judge his people. And so this judgment is inherently destabilizing, or at least it can be, depending on the circumstance. Of course, if everybody's living in accordance with the divine law, in unity with the external environment, a proper orientation of the subject to the object, this judgment does not appear as a fire, but rather it comes gracefully from heaven down to earth. But perhaps in this context, within the day that this psalmist is writing, it certainly is not this way. And even in our day, it certainly is not this way. We stand at the precipice of a major global change in the modern day, that is. And there is no doubt when we find ourselves falling ever faster that this divine wisdom will come in again to see us, to pay us a visit, to judge us. He calls to the heavens above and to the earth that he may judge his people. And so what might that mean? For God to call to the heavens above. We think of God as being something that is above everything, above the heavens, above the earth. But in this categorization, God has descended seemingly to a place between heaven and between earth. Because heaven is above and earth, which is presumably below. And I think what this means is that the purpose that God is serving here is to unite the two. He calls to the heaven above, orient their attention, the heavenly attention, to where God is in relation to it, and he calls to the earth. And so they look up while heaven looks down to meet God in the middle. Gather to me my faithful ones who have made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. And so these next verses here are very interesting. When he goes into the talking about the sacrifices and what it means. So in this sense here, in verse 5 and verse 6, the covenant and the sacrifices are the reason that the heavens declare his righteousness. Or perhaps I say that may be a misinterpretation. Gather to me my faithful ones. This is a quote. This is sort of the voice of God, who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. And so this could be referring to the individuals, or God himself, but it would make sense if it was the individuals that made the covenant and the sacrifice. That increases this view in the divine sight. Hear, O my people, hear, O my people, and I will speak, O Israel. I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. So let's stop there. This is verse 8. It's an interesting contrast between verse 8 and verse 5 and verse 6. So again, verse 8. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. So in other words, it's not because you're making the wrong sacrifices. Your burnt offerings are there all the time. You're giving to me part of your livelihood. You're burning the food up to me. And so I don't rebuke you for that. I will not accept a bull from your house, or goats from your folds. For every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills, and all that moves in the field is mine. So again, it's not that they give so that the Lord may be enriched. That's not the point of the sacrifice. The point of the sacrifice is to give up something of value for a greater purpose. And I think we can think of this in terms of the subject. I mean, it's always going to come back to this for me. What it means for the subject, for the individual to sacrifice. What does the individual need to place on the altar? What is the modern day burnt offering, let's say? With this large understanding, this civilized, conscious mind of man, what is it about this thing that we've created that we must sacrifice in order for us to be in harmony, to have our soul to be at rest, or rather our soul to be enlivened, depending on how you want to look at it. Enlivened and striving towards the good. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. So again, it's this thing of humanity's responsibility is not to provide in that way for the Lord. The Lord has everything that he wants. The request is of the human being. What they give is a sacrifice. Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving. So they are giving because they are thankful for what they have, not because they are giving to God to improve his condition. He doesn't need anything. And perform your vows to the Most High, and call upon me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you shall glorify me. Verse 16. But to the wicked God says, what right have you to recite my statutes, or take my covenant on your lips? Another common theme in my mind and of my thought is this perennial problem. Perhaps we can call it a perennial problem, I don't know, but it seems as though the institutions of man are always plagued by eventual decay and pathology. And when I read verse 16, I think of, but to the wicked, God says, what right do you have to recite my statutes, or to take my covenant on your lips? When we see a pathological institution in front of us, this is what I think of. I think, what right do you have? Do you not recognize your own place in this world, whether it be a government, whether it be a healthcare institution, whether it be a corporation? Of course, a healthcare institution could be a corporation, but I mean more in from a marketing goods type perspective, material goods, or even of the individual. It scales at all levels of reality. Because the wicked, if they recite the statutes, are using the statutes, whether it be an institution or an individual, they're using the statutes for their own ends. They're not giving the proper sacrifice. They're giving to improve their own condition, not to recognize and to give thanks for what they have been given, and to give up something that is of value to them, not so that they may receive materially, but so that in the process of doing so, they can further appreciate what has already been given to them. Because in the absence of what we have, our mind then focuses on what remains to preserve us. And the less we have, I think the more thankful we can become. Or at least the experience of at one point in our life of having very little and being able to find it within ourselves to know and understand the finer things, to perform the vows to the Most High. And I think the wicked do not understand this. Or if they do, the explicit wicked, I think that you can have the two types of wicked. The ones that perhaps don't know the consequences of their action, and yet by proximity they are sort of wicked. And then the wicked who explicitly understand what they're doing, that know better, and yet they do not do better. And this can go along with our frame shift. It can go along with this frame shift that we were talking about, with the objective materialism, this rationalism, empiricism, scientific method. If it is the only thing, the only way of viewing, if it's not incorporated into a larger corpus of understanding, then how can this not lead one to wickedness or self-destruction or destruction at the collective level? Again, this is something that probably scales at all levels of our reality. Verse 17, "For you hate discipline, and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, you are pleased with him, and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil, and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother. You slander your own mother's son. These things you have done, and I have been silent. You thought that I was one like yourself, but now I rebuke you and lay the charge before you." Mark this, then, you who forget God, lest I tear you apart, and there be none to deliver. The one who offers thanksgiving as his sacrifice glorifies me. To one who orders his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. And so we see here mercy, we see grace, potential forgiveness. We see outlined the way of the wicked. All very useful. And so I think I'm going to end this episode here. It has been an enlightening one. I will continue next time with "Create in me clean heart, O God," which is Psalm 51.